Hi, and welcome to my sewing room. A couple months ago, I posted a short showcasing this sweet little baby nine patch. A few of you have asked for a video tutorial, and today I'm going to show you how to make this quilt from start to finish. I do have a picture tutorial on my website, and I'll put a link to that in the description below, and you can follow along with that as well if you like. Also, stick around to the end and I'll show off this quilt done in several different colorways, so you can get an idea what it looks like with different colors. Alright, so let's jump right in. Let's start with the materials you'll need for this top. First, you'll need several various prints for the 9-patch blocks. You'll need 96 2.5-inch squares to be exact, which comes to a little less than a half a yard. Each 9-patch needs 8 different squares, so keep that in mind as you pick out your color scheme. One of the good things about this project is it's so versatile. You can use all kinds of colorways. You can use pastels, you can use brights, you can do holiday themed, you can go all out scrappy, you can do any favorite color combo that you like. If you're struggling with what kind of colors you want to use, jelly rolls are perfect for this project because they already come pre-packaged with colors and prints that you know will go together. The only problem is, this is a small quilt and you won't use very much of that jelly roll. So if you don't mind splitting up your jelly roll for other projects, this is a good way to go. You can also stick with one color combo and keep it scrappy, like I did with these blue blocks. Or you can pick a holiday combo theme like I did with my red, white, and blue blocks. Rainbow is always a good color choice too. For this one, I went with 8 colors, one for each square. You can do the same with any color combo that speaks to you. You pick 8 colors that you like together and put them all together. Charm packs are good to use as well. You can cut them up into 2.5-inch squares perfect, but you'll also have a lot of squares left over. I cut out these squares from a single charm pack I had. It gives me enough charms for one quilt with 72 squares left over. So I can either add 24 more squares to that and make another quilt, or I can put those other squares into my scrap bin for another project. I think I'm going to lean towards picking out a couple more prints and make 2 quilts. Now this quilt does bust your stash, but not a whole lot. You'd think 96 squares would be a lot, but it really only made a little tiny dent in some of my bins. But if you're in the groove and you're going, you can just cut out a bunch of 2.5-inch squares, make yourself some little quilt kits, and then when you need a little quilt fast, you already have it cut out and ready to go. Kind of like meal prep. You get them prepped, then you put it in the freezer and you eat it later. Whereas the freezer will be a bin in this case. The one I showed off in my previous YouTube video used a leftover jelly roll that was given to me by a friend. It had 36.5 strips left in it, so it was a pretty generous gift. That is definitely more strips than I needed for this quilt. I already made 2 quilts with this and a little baby pillow, and I still have lots of strips left over. For the center of the 9-patch, you'll need one 2.5-inch strip of a light print. You can stick with white, but I opted for a low volume print. It's almost white, but it still adds a little cuteness to the block with the speckled circles. You will also need half a yard of white for the sashing and 3/4 yards of a print for the border and the binding. The quilt measures 34 by 42, so you'll need a small piece of batting. A pre-packaged crib size is plenty big, and you'll need 1.5 yards of fabric for the backing. Once you have all your materials, it's time to start cutting. As I mentioned earlier, you will need 96 2.5-inch squares. You can cut these out from jelly roll strips or scraps, just make sure that you have 96. From the light 2.5-inch strip of fabric, you want to cut 12 2.5-inch squares. These will be the center of the 9-patch. For the white fabric, cut 6 strips 2.5 inches by the width of the fabric. Using 5 of the strips, subcut the following from each of the 5 strips. 2 6.5 by 2.5-inch rectangles. 1 26.5-inch by 2.5-inch rectangle. Take your last 2.5-inch strip of white and cut out 6 more 6.5 by 2.5-inch rectangles. This will give you a total of 5 white 26.5 by 2.5-inch rectangles and 16 white 6.5 by 2.5-inch rectangles. For the border fabric, cut 4 4.5-inch strips by the width of the fabric. Then subcut each of those 4 strips into 34.5 by 4.5-inch rectangles. Then you're going to want to cut 4 2.25-inch strips by the width of the fabric for your binding. Once we have everything cut, it's time to start sewing and make the blocks. The quilt is made up of 12 blocks, and they finish 6 inches in the quilt. These blocks are pretty easy to make. Start by placing a light print 2.5-inch square on the table and surround it with 8 random various prints. This should give you 3 rows of 3. Sew the squares together in rows to create a top, a middle, and a bottom row. Then you'll sew the top and the bottom rows to the middle row and you'll have your block. I like to stack all my squares together at the same time on a piece of sturdy cardboard and take them all to the machine and chain piece them. It makes the blocks go together so much faster. To help you with this, if you mentally number all the squares in the block, 1 through 9, then you take stack number 1 and you chain piece it to stack number 2. Once they're sewn, I clip all those, but I keep them in order. I press them and I put them back on the board where they were. Then I do the same thing for stack number 4 and 5, and then again for 7 and 8. Then I start again at the top and add number 3 to my number 1 and 2 section, and do the same for the middle and the bottom row. Once the rows are made, I chain piece again, sewing all the tops to the middle rows. I clip all those, press them, put them back in the right order, and then I chain piece the third row on. Chain piecing makes your blocks come together super fast. Once your blocks are sewn and pressed, it's time to start making rows. The quilt is made of 4 rows with sashing. A sashing strip is sewn at the beginning and the end of each row, and that helps create the side of the inner white border. To do this, I start by chain piecing a 6.5 inch by 2.5 inch white rectangle to the right side of every 9 patch. Then I lay out my 9 patches on the design wall in an order that looks good and start sewing my rows. At this point, the quilt is coming together nicely and it's time to sew the rows to each other. To do this, I sew a 26.5 inch by 2.5 inch sashing strip to the bottom of each row. I sew on the final top sashing piece and I'm ready for borders. It's not very often in a project when my side borders and my top borders are cut to the same size. I even measured 3 times to make sure I wasn't deceiving myself, but it was the case for this project. Using 2 of the 34.5 by 4.5 inch border rectangles, sew on the side borders first. Then take the last 2 strips and sew on the top and the bottom borders. Take a minute to stand back and admire the top. It's so cute, and I love how fast it comes together with chain piecing. This quilt is small enough that you don't have to piece your backing. I like that. A nice quick press with the iron and you're good to go. If you're short on time, you can quilt the top using a quick all-over meander or some swirls. But if you have a little more time, this top is the perfect size to practice some custom free motion quilting. In the sashing, you can practice little feathers or vines or even little candy waves. I would just recommend nothing too dense as you want to keep it soft for a little one to use. I opted for some simple custom quilting for mine. Nothing too fancy that took too long, but just enough to give it a fun custom quilted look. I did a few swirls in my sashing. For the 9 patches, I stitched in the ditch around the main block and did some point-to-point curves in each patch with a swirl in the center. My borders got a quick meander. Looking at the back shows off some more of the quilting. After the quilting, use the remaining 2.25 inch border strips for the binding. I like to stitch my binding to the back first and then flip it over to the front and machine stitch it down. This way, I'm always sure to catch the binding with a thread, and I get a nice finished line on the back that blends in well with the quilting. This quilt is fun to make, and with 12 small blocks and some chain piecing, you can have it sewn together and quilted within half a day. Now, depending on how long it takes you to pick out your fabrics in the beginning, that may add some more time to it. But if you already have them picked out, your sewing's good to go, and you can just whip right through this. It's so quick that I put together several other tops so you could see them finished in different colorways. I started out going to my pink bin, and I pulled out a bunch of fun pink scraps that I like. I tried to keep them more of the soft pink. I did have some bright dark pinks, but I wanted to keep this more soft and pastel-y, so I went more with a muted pink. And since I made pink, I decided, why not make blue? We'll have pink and blue. So I went into my blue bin, and again, I pulled out my softer blues for this one. But as I was going through my blue bin, I have a lot of dark blues, and that started to make me think about 4th of July. So I pulled out my dark blues, and I grabbed some nice bright reds, and I made a fun 4th of July quilt. This one I decided to do something different with the sashing, and I decided to use a nice light blue for the sashing and the inner border. I have some more red, white, and blue squares cut out, and I think I'll make another one, and I might even try a lighter blue for the sashing and see how it looks with a red border. Again, there's lots of color combos, and sometimes you don't know how they'll look until you actually try them out. And finally, I have a scrappy rainbow version. Each color has 12 different prints, so I have 12 reds, 12 oranges, and you get the idea. So there are 96 different prints in this one. There's so many different color combos, and I had fun making all of them, but I'm thinking I'm leaning towards this first one as my favorite. The coloring in it is just so sweet for a baby quilt. Which one's your favorite? What color combos would you use? I'd love to hear in the comments below. It's always fun to have more ideas of different color combos for this little quilt. Thanks so much for watching, and happy quilting!